Hello Terraria enthusiasts, my name is James, and as most of you know by now, in the next console patch for PS4 and Xbox One, Ocram will actually be permanently removed from the game, leaving behind only his mask and trophy, which will then become legacy items. As this is the first time we've had something removed from Terraria of this scale, I thought I would give you the complete history of Ocram, so console players can reflect, and people coming to this video in a few months have a nice place to research what they've missed. I'm going to also go over how Terraria was completely cancelled too, and then how it was brought back to life, because it's a pretty interesting tale and it really intertwines with this boss. So to understand Ocram origins, you first have to go back to February 2012, 11 months after the public release of Terraria, and 2 months after the launch of the final update 1.1.1, or so we thought. So after a very successful launch and a few game-changing updates, the creator of Terraria, Andrew Spinks, actually stepped away from the project to discover new stuff in his personal life and build upon what he had learned with Terraria. It was also at this time that the artist for the game, Finn Bryce, went on to found Chucklefish Studios and crowdfunded their first game, Starbound, which in 2012 was actually labelled the spiritual successor to Terraria, but we're going to hit more on that phrase later in the video. Now, as you can imagine, there was quite a response to Andrew leaving the project so soon, but considering the overwhelming amount of success he received in such a short span of time, it's honestly not surprising that he decided to retire the project and take some personal time to breathe. It would actually be almost 2 years before we would see another update to Terraria, so in that time Relogic actually partnered with 505 Games to help hire and publish a console version of the game, which was created by Engine Software for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 and launched on March 27th, 2013. Now, spoilers for the console edition actually began on September 10th, 2012 with this post from the official Facebook page. The image was distorted and hinted at something big coming soon. Now, as Andrew had left the project 7 months earlier, there was a lot of hype for this being the return of Red, as players were desperate for new content for the game. And to match this hype, the next day they announced the console version with a very little part at the end which read, with brand new content. Now, upon reflection, it's actually quite obvious from the quality of the console exclusive items that this was an attempt to market the game to PC players who were starving for new content, and so Engine Software got to work on respriting some of the items already in Terraria and including them as new items, and that part right there is actually the reason why they're being removed now. Although most of the community wasn't happy that PC wasn't getting any new content and Andrew had been radio silent at this point for almost a year, the community did start getting involved again. There was a meme competition held on the forums, suggestion threads were being reopened, and then in January 2013, Andrew tweeted out that he is working on something new for PC. This was followed by a tweet to a random guy with 100 subscribers called ChippyGaming, saying that he'd already added 100 new items. This would be the first tweet about the 1.2 update, which launched a few months later. So the context of what I just mentioned there is pretty important. When Engine Software began working on the port in 2012, Red was not working at all on the game, so they added their own content in. Now, because they were not the creators of the game, the content they added was very lackluster, which is why it never balanced well with the game. Then they also had to keep the momentum going for their console port, so to generate steam for the port, they announced in February 2013 a brand new final boss which would be added into the game. They actually did this in the form of a word search which had the name of the boss hidden inside of it, which they kept hidden for a few weeks. As we all know now, the boss was named Ocram, which is meant to be Marco reversed, the name of the programmer who coded him, and it was actually kept a secret for quite some time. They actually used a shadowed version of the boss in a teaser trailer so that nobody would figure out what it was. However, on launch day, it only took a few hours before somebody pulled the sprite of the final boss from the game and shared it with the public. This person was actually Eraser, who would actually become the lead developer of Terraria a few years later. That's just a random little tidbit there. Now, the Ocram fight is actually pretty cool too. The boss looks really terrifying and uses a similar AI to the Eye of Cthulhu as it follows the player and releases minions. The boss also had a very cool laser attack which is pretty overwhelming. In a way, it's actually very similar to Skeletron being very much like Skeletron Prime. Now, because the PC and console teams were truly split up at this point, it meant that Ocram was released at a pretty poor time. When it was first released, it had a very expensive summoning item and dropped some of the best armor in the game, but it would actually take hours and hours to grind it all, and it was made completely irrelevant in just a few months, as 1.2 for the PC added 3 new bosses which were much stronger than Ocram and much more developed. After that, Ocram was completely unbalanced when 1.2 was eventually ported to console a few years later, and the Ocram trophy and mask were added just to fit the theme of the other bosses, and the console exclusive items were all resprited to have their own designs. And now we approach the launch of console version 1.3, and the PC team has decided to remove Ocram as it no longer aligns with the game. So the context I've given today I feel like kind of explains why too. The boss was never a creation of Relogic, and it was made as a marketing tactic to help sell the console edition of the game. By removing it, we now have a one Terraria experience where everything was created by one vision. That said though, I do think Ocram deserves to stay. It needs some love to better fit the game, yes, but I think it's a deep part of the game's history at this point, but that's just me. The console version was met with a lot of success though, and although the console exclusive items were pretty bad, the game did really well. 1.2 remained in development during that time too, and released in October 2013 and pushed the game back into the mainstream, going on to sell millions and millions of copies of the game. Starbound also launched during this time too, with a beta that would wipe player saves every few days, as this was once slated to be the spiritual successor to Terraria before Red returned. It's pretty ironic that it had such a rough launch during Terraria's golden hours, and Starbound wouldn't actually see a proper launch until 3 years later. So that is actually the story of Ocram, the boss which never aligned, and how Terraria almost got cancelled for good. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a thumbs up and subscribing to ChippyGaming for all your Terraria needs. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.